Good morning, and can I welcome everyone to the Justice Committee's first meeting in 2013, and a Happy New Year to you all, and a collective hug and a kiss. Please switch off your mobile... Well, don't look so unhappy about that, John. Please switch off mobile phones and other electronic devices completely, as the interview of the broadcasting system, even when switched to silent, and no apologies have been received. The team is complete. Item 1, decision on taking business in private. You're invited to agree whether to consider item 69 in private at today's meeting. Are you agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 2, subordinate legislation, is the first part of our consideration of affirmative statutory instrument, the draft Knife Dealers Licence Conditions Scotland Order 2012, and we take evidence from the Cabinet Secretary. Now, I welcome the Cabinet Secretary and Scottish Government officials, Quentin Fisher, Head of Licensing Branch, and Walter Drummond-Murray, Policy Officer, Criminal Law and Licensing Division. And Cabinet Secretary, do you want to make an opening statement?
No, thanks.
That's grand. There will therefore be no questions because there has been no statement. Now move on to item 3, which is formal consideration of the draft Knife Dealers Licensing Conditions Scotland Order 2012, which is our debate and the motion to approve the instrument. Can I ask your Cabinet Secretary to move the motion to approve the instrument, please?
Formally moved.
Does any member wish to say anything? Well,
Can I
yes,
ask Convener if there are any plans, Cabinet Secretary, to toughen up on licensing conditions in the near future?
In particular with regard to knives?
Yes.
Well, these matters we keep under constant discussion and review. We're happy to take on board any thoughts, and clearly we speak to the relevant trade bodies. So it's under basically constant review to see what would help to make Scotland a safer place.
Thank you.
That's fine, thank you. And now the question is that motion S4M 5254 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Thank you very much. Can I thank your Cabinet Secretary for this? It's the swiftest of attendances.
Can I raise a point for information? Is there any chance that the Cabinet Secretary could take some questions about police reform?
Oh, I think that I think Cabinet Secretary, in fairness to the Cabinet Secretary, we should have given notice of that in the circumstances also not on our agenda. So I'm happy for the Cabinet Secretary to ask the Cabinet Secretary to come back after we've had our discussion today. Thank you. Unless you feel otherwise. But I think in the circumstances it's appropriate, and I'm sure you have other matters to deal with. Thank you very much. Right, I'm just going to move on to item 4, subordinate legislation. 2 negative instruments, Civic Government Scotland Act 1982, Metal Dealers Exemption Warrants, Order 2012, SSI 2012-324, and the Act of Suderent Fees of Sheriff Officers Amendment No. 2, 2012, SSI 2012-341. The subordinate legislation, no comments to draw to attention to these instruments. Do members have any comments on either of these instruments? No. Are you content, therefore, to make no recommendations? Yes. Thank you very much. Item 5, Police and Fire Reform. Now, we've got a progress update on fire reform, which you've got with paper 4. The SP and the Chief Constable of Police of Scotland has also provided updates on police reform, which are emailed to members for Christmas. And you've also got something additional in your New Year Christmas stocking, which I think appeared on the SPA's website. Now, do members, I'm just quite happy to have you a discussion on this. And we'll do that first and then decide whether we want to take further evidence, such as calling the Chief Constable or the Chief Executive of the SP, indeed the Cabinet Secretary, before us again. So off you go. The floor is yours. Comments, please. Graham.
Time's marching on. There seems to be a great deal of confusion in the arrangements going forward. It's certainly been made a point to me on a number of occasions, the latest occasion this morning, that trade unions are not being consulted or informed of the movement and the arrangements for the single police authority. The letter from Chief Constable appears to me to be a plea to Parliament to remove some of the frictions that he perceives from his viewpoint. And we've had assurances from the chair of the police authority that these matters would be resolved during December, and they weren't. We're now told that later this month there's going to be a meeting of the authority, and there didn't seem to be too much information to give us comfort that this whole machine is moving forward in an effective manner. I do think we should be hearing from the Cabinet Secretary, from the Chief Constable and from the Chair, and I would like some confidence that we know where we're going with this thing. We've got less than 3 months left.
I think in terms of some of the circumstances for staff, I hear what you're saying about there not being any settlement, as it were, yet, but I think some statutory instruments are going through that protect the wages and pensions. Am I correct? I think I saw those. But that's the technical stuff. I understand
right.
that.
What staff aren't being told is, do they have a job in 3 months' time? Will they be working where they're currently working? They just want to know some of the mechanics and the chemistry of what's going on just now.
I think, as I say, some of the statutory instruments are dealing with the transfer of employment and security, but I appreciate the practicalities of for people.
But the fact that the board have been told they can't comment to staff about these arrangements and are not happy to take meetings is very concerning.
I agree. Now, I've got a list: John, and then Rod, and then Alison, then Sandra.
Thank you, Convener. I would just like to support Graham's comments there, setting aside the fact that it's very best practice anyway to engage with all your workforce, and I stress all your workforce, not a select few. There are statutory requirements for consultation when there's any substantive changes in the workplace. So I think it would be a very good signal to the operation of the police service after April, if the run-up to April saw best practice being applied in relation to staff and trade union relations.
Who have I got now? Rod, and then Alison. Rod.
It's obviously disappointing that the hoped-for resolution before the end of the year hasn't taken place. There's no two ways about it. I mean, we obviously know that the Scottish Police Authority is meeting on the 18th, and obviously we've seen the comments of the Chief Constable about things. So I kind of agree that we should give this matter some kind of focus and urgency. Let the Chief Constable and the Police Authority know that we're not just ignoring the matter. It's a question of kind of time scale. When would be an appropriate time to give them a little bit longer to try and see if they can resolve this?
Alison.
Thank you. Well, I share members' concerns that this matter hasn't been resolved, and I don't believe, I mean, we've only just had sight of the paper that's going to the board on the 18th of January, but my initial reading of that paper is not that things have been resolved, but that the chair is setting out how he would like to see it proceed, and taking that in tandem with the letter from the Chief Constable, who says that he thinks there needs to be a change in legislation, then I think it's pressing now that we actually have both the Cabinet Secretary and the team back in front of us to explore these issues.
Sandra.
Thank you very much, Convener. Having downloaded the paper just about 10 minutes ago and had a look through it, I'm rather confused at times, concerned perhaps. Legislation was passed for this, and that's passed. It's exactly the same legislation as the fire, and it seems to be just two personalities it's causing here. So I don't know if I agree with Steve House regarding changing legislation, if it's the same legislation that's went through, but certainly in regards to trade unions and staff and what's happening there, I think we should be looking at it again, because we really haven't had any comfort from the email.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the letter from, I mean, as you know, we wrote to the Chair and Chief Officer of the Fire and Rescue Service, and of course we've got a joint reply. Now, there was a cheery thing, wasn't it? Not two separate ones. And if you look at the paragraph in there where it says the specific responsibilities of the SFRS and the SFRS Board in relation to human resources and finances, which is the area of contention here, will be dealt with through the scheme of delegation. However, we are clear that the SFRS Board is the employer and responsible for setting the strategic direction, and through effective scrutiny holding the executive of the service to account for the delivery of the strategy. For this to work effectively and efficiently, working within the scheme of delegation, the overall day-to-day financial and human resource management responsibilities will be for the Chief Officer to manage. Now, there may be impediments in the legislation. I don't know to why this cannot be adopted by the two gentlemen concerned representing the agency. If you comment on that, Graham.
Yes, I think that Sandra's right, that there seems to be some personalities involved in this dispute, but it's been conducted at public expense and with some degree of public concern that we've allowed this to ongo. This was delivered to us, and no harm to our own Secretariat. I think that they've turned it around as quickly as they can, but we received this at 10 to 7 this morning. And what it seemed...
You were up at 10 to 7 this morning. My goodness, you just wanted that on the record.
Indeed. And when one analyses, at first they rush through the paper, it looks as though we've got a shadow group. We've got a set of senior people within the police service responsible for HR, finance and other functions, and the authority are going to employ a second group of people in charge of exactly the same functions. And this was supposed to be about reducing management costs in order to protect front-end services. This doesn't reflect best practice, and it seems to me that the board has got enough to do to bring a police service to account and to show good governance without trying to manage and drive forward part of the service on their own part.
Do I take it from that, Graham, that and everybody else in the committee, that you think that the resolution that has been reached for the Fire and Rescue Service is one that is a model that could be adopted by the Police Authority and the Chief Constable?
It's something that I raised a year ago with the Cabinet Secretary and thought that it was a common sense way of approach. I cannot understand why there's been this difficulty thus far.
Apart from the fact that surely to goodness they're listening to what we have to say, or they're going to read what we have to say about this, do you want me to write on your behalf and say, well, why are you not doing this? Why are you simply not following the sensible model that has been put forward by the Fire and Rescue Service, and let's get on with things?
As a matter of urgency.
As a matter of urgency. Now, I have to say that what we can do, if the resolution isn't along those lines, or along lines that are satisfactory to both parties, because of our commitments to prison visits, the next time the committee sits is the 29th of January, but we could, if necessary, given that the SPA is meeting the 18th of January, factor in a special committee meeting, if the matters are not resolved by that. And do it on a Wednesday. Well, I know some of you have other committee commitments on Wednesday morning, so we'd need to negotiate with you, but to have a short committee meeting.
Yeah. Hopefully that won't be necessary. The only other thing that I would comment on my own behalf, and I'm quite happy if the rest of the committee shy away from this, but I find it amazing that the Cabinet Secretary would come here this morning and not seek to make some kind of statement.
Well,
irrespective of the administration and the courtesies of this committee.
No, I'm not prepared
to
say that.
This is a very pressing issue.
I agree with you, but I think the Cabinet Secretary's had every opportunity to hear what we have to say about this. So, you know, it's not going to make much difference. And I would never pounce upon anyone as a witness, let alone the Cabinet Secretary or anybody else, who has not had notice. If you had given me notice you wish to raise this, I would certainly have brought it to his attention, as we
I
may
would have
wish to
done
ask
after
you
7 this morning, but unfortunately we weren't together at that time.
Well, I don't know what to say to that, but I think you've done.
Well, we know you've had a previous association with David McCletchie. So.
I think you've had enough confessions this morning. You may regret it. I'm glad to see you're blushing for anybody who's just listening to this. You always blush. That's not true. But anyway, we're moving on. So what you want me to do now is to see, write in those terms, copy it into it to see why this model is not being followed, with perhaps a sort of Damocles saying if we don't have a resolution, and I mean a resolution mutually acceptable to them, following their meeting at the 18th of January. Do we give them a deadline? The 18th of January? Then we will have a special meeting, and we will ask the Cabinet Secretary as well. John?
Convener, I think it would be prudent to also encourage or discourage any engagement of personnel or to assist any ongoing proceedings to engage further staff, because this quite clearly is two empires have been built and it may be that there are trains running that should be stopped at this early stage. I
also think it's very important to put in, thank you for that, very important to put into the letter our concerns for those who are not in the middle of this scrap, but who work there, who have a great deal of insecurity and have got lives to go on with, and would like this settled as much as the Scottish public would. Okay? Happy about that. That's as we move on. Thank you very much. Now we're going into private. So there we are. You can get a cup of tea.